The ultimate hook teaser, warning, heartbreak, and a special kind of payback ahead. It started with a scent. Not the cheap perfume of a one-night stand, but the expensive, sandalwood and bergamot cologne of a man I was paying to save my marriage. Dr. Alistair Finch, our marriage counselor. He wasn't just listening to my wife's frustrations, he was becoming the solution to them in my bed in my house. The betrayal was so perfect, so clinically executed, it was almost impressive. They thought I was the oblivious, hardworking husband, too wrapped up in my architectural firm to notice the foundation of my own life crumbling. They were wrong. Rage is a powerful motivator, but cold, calculated clarity. That's how you dismantle an empire. They wanted to play games. I was about to write the rules. You think you know how this ends? A messy divorce, a screaming match. Think again. What I uncovered next and what I did with that knowledge changed everything. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever faced a betrayal that left you speechless? What's your ultimate revenge fantasy or your path to healing? Let's share some stories. Part 1: The Scent of Deception. It's funny the things you notice when your world is about to implode. For me, it wasn't a lipstick-stained collar or hushed phone calls. It was the lingering ghost of a scent in our bedroom, a fragrance that was decidedly not mine. I wear a generic, inoffensive aftershave that smells vaguely like blue. This was different. It was rich, complex sandalwood, bergamot, and a hint of something smug. It smelled expensive. It smelled like the kind of cologne a man who charges $350 an hour to listen to your problems would wear. My wife, Amelia, and I had been married for 15 years. We were a classic suburban portrait, a sprawling Tudor in a leafy New Jersey suburb, two kids navigating the treacherous waters of middle school, and a shared history that felt as comfortable and worn as our leather sofa. I'm an architect, a partner at a mid-sized firm in Manhattan. I build things, strong, stable things designed to withstand time and pressure. It was my life's irony that the structure I'd poured my soul into, my marriage, was silently developing stress fractures. We started seeing Dr. Alistair Finch 6 months ago, Amelia's idea. "We're not communicating, Mark," she'd said, her voice strained during one of our increasingly rare late-night conversations. "We're just coexisting, co-managing the kids and the mortgage." She wasn't wrong. The spark hadn't just faded, it felt like the pilot light had gone out. I was working 60-hour weeks, trying to land a legacy project that would secure our future. I thought I was doing the right thing, building a fortress for our family. I didn't realize I was leaving the gate open. Dr. Finch was everything you'd expect. He had a calming baritone voice, a tastefully decorated office with an Eames chair, and a way of looking at you with intense, unnerving empathy. He was handsome in a distinguished, graying at the temples way that probably made half his female clients question their own marriages. He'd nod sagely as I spoke of my pressures at work and then turn to Amelia, his gaze softening as she spoke of her loneliness. He made her feel seen. I apparently made her feel like a logistics manager. The first time I smelled the cologne, I dismissed it. Maybe a client of Amelia's. She was a freelance interior designer. It was plausible. The second time, a week later, it was stronger, clinging to the throw pillows on our bed. My brain, the logical, pattern-seeking architect's brain, started connecting dots. Amelia had a solo session with Finch that afternoon. A makeup for the one I missed last month, she'd said breezily. "How was it?" I asked that evening, trying to sound casual. "Good, productive," she said, not looking up from her laptop. "Alistair thinks I need to focus on my own internal validation. Stop seeking it from external sources." "Alistair, we're on a first-name basis with the shrink now." A bit of sarcasm dripped from my words, a defense mechanism I'd honed over the years. She finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "He's a person, Mark. Not just the shrink, he's helping me." The third time I smelled it, the world tilted on its axis. I came home early from the city, a migraine pounding behind my eyes. I walked into our bedroom and the scent hit me like a physical blow. It was fresh, potent, the kind of scent that hadn't been lingering for hours, but for minutes. And there, on my wife's nightstand, next to her glass of water, was a single silver cufflink. It wasn't mine. It was a sleek, minimalist design, an interlocking F, Finch. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I backed out of the room, my breath catching in my throat. every nerve ending screamed. It was a primal, gut-wrenching certainty that bypassed all logic and went straight for the soul. The man I was paying to fix my marriage was systematically dismantling it, piece by piece, in my own damn bed. My fortress had been breached. And the enemy wasn't at the gates, he was already in the throne room. Part 2, the digital footprints. Denial is a powerful sedative. For a few days, I tried to convince myself I was insane. The cufflink, a gift for me she hadn't given me yet. The cologne, a sample she was considering for my birthday. I was overworked, stressed, paranoid. I was the villain in my own story, projecting my insecurities onto a wife who was just trying to heal our relationship. It was a comforting lie, but it was as flimsy as a house of cards in a hurricane. The architect in me took over. Before you can build, you must survey the land. You need data, cold, hard facts. My emotions were a volatile mess of rage, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness. I couldn't trust them, but I could trust evidence. Amelia was an open book, or so I thought. Her digital life, however, was a fortress of its own. Her phone was perpetually attached to her hand, her laptop screen angled away from me whenever I entered a room. This newfound privacy, once a minor annoyance, now seemed like a blazing red flag. The opportunity came on a Tuesday night. Amelia was at her book club, an event that had suddenly become sacrosanct. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway, the crunch of tires on gravel a starting pistol for my descent into espionage. Her laptop was on the kitchen island, open. She'd forgotten to close it, a rookie mistake. My hands trembled as I sat down. I wasn't a hacker, I didn't know her passwords, but I did know her. Her mother's maiden name, the name of her first pet, our anniversary. I tried them all, nothing. Then I remembered something she'd said in one of our sessions with Finch. My childhood was my safe space, she'd murmured, a nostalgic sadness in her eyes. I typed in the name of the street she grew up on, followed by her childhood house number. Maplewood 1138, access granted. I felt a sickening jolt, a mixture of triumph and dread. The screen opened to her email. It was mostly spam and newsletters, but then I saw it, a folder on the sidebar labeled Projects. A designer's folder, innocuous. I clicked. It was filled with subfolders, the Henderson kitchen, the Miller bathroom, and one that didn't fit. Alistair, my blood ran cold. I opened it. It wasn't filled with design specs or paint swatches. It was a digital treasure trove of their affair. There were emails, dozens of them. The early ones were couched in therapeutic language. Amelia, our session today was a breakthrough. Your feelings of being unheard are valid. Remember to prioritize your own emotional needs, but the tone shifted quickly. Alistair, I can't stop thinking about what you said, about living authentically. Authenticity looks beautiful on you, Amelia. I find myself thinking of our conversations long after you've left. Then came the texts, synced to her iMessage. They were a brutal, time-stamped chronicle of my humiliation. He has no idea, does he? He's so wrapped up in his blueprints. A message from her, sent while I was sitting across from her at dinner 2 weeks ago. It's part of your allure, my dear, the caged bird longing to be free. Let me be your key. A reply from Finch, dripping with the kind of pseudo-intellectual seduction that made me want to vomit. There were pictures. Selfies of them in his office, his arm draped possessively around her, the Eames chair in the background. A shot of their legs intertwined, taken on what was unmistakably my side of our bed, the corner of my favorite hardcover novel visible on the nightstand. There was even a short video, no more than 10 seconds long. Amelia laughing, her head thrown back, as Finch's hand came into the frame, tracing the line of her jaw. The intimacy of it was a physical assault. He was touching my wife with the same hands that gestured with professional authority as he told me to be more emotionally available. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the glow of the screen illuminating the wreckage of my life. The architect in me saw the flawed design, the compromised materials, the inevitable structural failure. The husband in me felt nothing but a hollow, echoing void. The rage was still there, a simmering magma beneath the surface. But now it was joined by something else, a cold, crystalline focus. They had built this narrative of the oblivious husband, the workaholic fool. They had documented their betrayal with arrogant carelessness. They had given me the blueprints to their destruction. And I, the builder, was about to get to work. I took out my phone and with methodical precision began to photograph every single email, every text, every picture. I was no longer the victim. I was the surveyor gathering the evidence needed to condemn a rotten structure. Part 3, The Architect of Retribution. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To Amelia, I was the same husband, a little distant, maybe, a little quieter, but she chalked it up to stress from the big project. She'd occasionally give me a sympathetic look, sometimes even a tender touch on the arm, and the hypocrisy of it was so profound it was almost darkly comic. She was trying to manage my feelings, to keep the boat steady while she was drilling holes in the hull below deck. Inside, I was a different man. The shock had solidified into a chilling resolve. Heartbreak is a messy, chaotic emotion. But revenge requires a plan. It requires blueprints, and I was nothing if not a meticulous planner. My first move was to understand my opponent, not Amelia. I understood her motivations all too well now. Boredom, a craving for validation, the thrill of a midlife rebellion. It was a cliché, but clichés are born from truth. No, my target was Dr. Alastair Finch. He was the real villain in this drama. He wasn't just an adulterer, he was a predator who had abused a position of sacred trust. He had used my vulnerability and my wife's as an aphrodisiac. He had monetized my pain while amplifying it. I did a deep dive. Finch had a pristine professional reputation, glowing reviews on every psychology portal, a small but respectable list of published articles in obscure academic journals. He presented himself as a pillar of the therapeutic community. But everyone has cracks in their foundation. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Sal who operated out of a dusty office above a pizzeria. I didn't tell him the whole story. I just said I needed a comprehensive background and asset check on Finch for a sensitive business matter. Sal just grunted and named his price. While Sal was digging, I focused on the home front. I needed more than just digital evidence. I needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away as a fantasy or a misunderstanding. I needed to catch them in the act. Amelia's solo sessions with Alastair had become a weekly ritual. Every Thursday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m., she'd get dressed up, a little more makeup than usual, a spritz of her best perfume. "Got to go unpack my emotional baggage," she'd say with a wink. The brazenness was staggering. I bought a GPS tracker, a tiny magnetic device the size of a quarter. On a Wednesday night while she slept, I slipped out to the garage and attached it to the undercarriage of her SUV. The next day I left for the city as usual, but instead of going to my office, I parked in a coffee shop a few blocks from Finch's practice. I opened the tracking app on a burner phone I'd bought. At 1:55 p.m., I watched the little blue dot representing my wife's car pull into the parking lot behind Finch's building, but it didn't stay there. 10 minutes later, the blue dot moved again. It traveled 2 miles across town, coming to a stop at a discreet, upscale hotel, the Briarwood. My heart pounded. It wasn't just his office. They had a place, their place. The following Thursday, I was ready. I took the day off, telling my partners I had a stomach bug. I sat in my car in the Briarwoods parking lot, my camera with its telephoto lens on the passenger seat. I felt like a character in a cheap spy movie, but the knot in my stomach was painfully real. At 2:15 p.m., just as the app predicted, Amelia's SUV pulled in. She got out, looking around nervously before walking toward the side entrance. 5 minutes later, Finch's sleek black Audi glided into the spot next to hers. He emerged, looking less like a therapist and more like a silver fox on the prowl. He didn't even bother to look around. His arrogance was his Achilles heel. I lifted the camera, the lens brought his face into sharp focus. Click, then Amelia turning back at the door as he approached. Click, him placing a hand on the small of her back, his expression possessive. Click, click, click. "I had them that evening," Sal called. "Got something on your guy Finch," he said, his voice gravelly. "He's clean on paper, no criminal record, no lawsuits, but his finances, that's a different story. The guy is leveraged to the hilt. Big mortgage, bigger alimony payments to 2 ex-wives. He's leasing that fancy Audi, and here's the kicker. His professional liability insurance, it lapsed 3 months ago. He missed the payment." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The man had built his entire life on a facade of professional and financial stability. He was a house of cards, just like my marriage. One strong gust of wind and the whole thing would come tumbling down. I now had the digital evidence, the photographic evidence, and the financial leverage. I had the blueprints, the materials, and the demolition plan. The only thing left was to choose the day, and I knew exactly when it would be. Our 16th wedding anniversary. It was 3 weeks away. A day that was supposed to celebrate the structure we had built together would now be the day I ceremoniously tore it all down. Part 4, Whispers and Alliances. The 3 weeks leading up to our anniversary were the most surreal of my life. I was a ghost in my own home, observing the routines, the small talk, the hollow gestures of affection. Amelia was more attentive than she'd been in years. She'd make my favorite dinner, suggest we watch a movie, even initiate intimacy one night. It was a performance, a desperate attempt to shore up her side of the story, to be the wife who was trying so hard. Each act of feigned affection was a fresh twist of the knife, but it also hardened my resolve. She wasn't just deceiving me, she was insulting my intelligence. During this time, I realized I couldn't do this alone. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but preparing it in isolation can drive a man mad. I needed an ally, a confidant. I thought of my brother, but he was a hothead. I thought of my friends, but I couldn't bear the pity in their eyes. Then I thought of the one person who had seen the cracks in my marriage long before I had, Amelia's older sister, Chloe. Chloe and I had always had a strange relationship. We were friendly, but there was a tension there. She was a no-nonsense doctor, sharp, perceptive, and fiercely protective of her sister, but she also saw through Amelia's carefully constructed image. Years ago, after a family argument where Amelia had played the victim, Chloe had cornered me in the kitchen. "My sister loves the idea of a perfect life, Mark," she'd said, her eyes searching mine. "Just be careful you don't get lost in her set design." The comment had stung at the time. Now it felt prophetic. I met her for coffee, choosing a place far from our usual neighborhood haunts. She walked in, her expression wary. "Is everything okay, Mark?" Your text sounded urgent. I didn't waste time, I laid it all out. The cologne, the cufflink, the emails, the photos from the hotel. I spoke in a low, measured voice, the voice of an architect presenting a structural analysis report. I showed her a few of the photos on my burner phone. Chloe stared at the screen, her face pale. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just traced the outline of her coffee cup with her finger. When she finally looked up, there was no pity in her eyes. There was a familiar, weary anger. "Alistair Finch," she said, her voice tight, "of course." She always did have a thing for men who seemed like they had all the answers. She took a deep breath. "Mark, I am so sorry. I can't say I'm completely surprised. I've seen her drifting, but this, with her therapist, it's sick. It's a violation on every level. I have a plan, Chloe," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm going to expose them, both of them." A flicker of something, admiration maybe, crossed her face. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to get her to a specific place at a specific time, our anniversary. I'm planning a surprise dinner at the Willows, our favorite restaurant, but I need you to be the one to bring her. Tell her you're taking her for a spa day beforehand and then meeting me there. She'll trust you." Chloe nodded slowly, her mind already working. "And Finch, how are you getting him there?" "That's the beautiful part," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "He's going to come willingly. He's going to think he's walking into a trap I'm setting for Amelia." I had spent a week carefully crafting an anonymous email to Dr. Finch from a disposable account. The subject line was, "I know about you and Amelia." The body of the email was short and to the point. I hinted that I was a disgruntled former client who had discovered his unethical behavior and was planning on going to the state licensing board. I included one of the less incriminating photos from the hotel, just enough to prove I was real, and said that if he wanted to discuss a financial arrangement to make this all go away, he should meet me at a private room in the Willows on The evening of our anniversary. I named the date and time. I knew his financial precarity, thanks to Sal, was my trump card. The man was desperate. He'd walk into the lion's den if he thought there was a bag of gold waiting for him. Chloe listened to the whole plan, her expression unreadable. "It's diabolical, Mark. It's also brilliant." She looked me straight in the eye. "She's my sister and I love her, but what she did is inexcusable, and what he did is predatory. They built this mess. Let's see how they feel when the walls come down. I'm in." Leaving that coffee shop, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer a solitary agent of chaos. I had an ally. The plan felt more real, more solid. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the narrative. My story wasn't going to be one of a cuckolded husband. It was going to be the story of a man who, when his world was systematically demolished, picked up the pieces and used them to build a battering ram. Part 5, Setting the Stage. The final days were a masterclass in deception. I played the part of the loving, slightly forgetful husband to perfection. I forgot about our anniversary until Amelia, with a hint of exasperation, reminded me. "Mark, you know what Saturday is, right?" she asked as I was packing my briefcase. I feigned a look of dawning horror. "Oh God, the 16th. I am so sorry, Ames. This project has my head completely scrambled. Let me make it up to you. I'll book a table at the Willows, our spot. We'll celebrate properly." Her relief was palpable. "I'd love that," she said, smiling. It was the smile of someone who had just successfully passed a lie detector test. The day before the anniversary, I executed the next phase of the plan. I had discovered that Finch was a prominent alumnus of his university's psychology department. He was listed on their website as a mentor and a donor. I also found the contact information for the head of the state's professional licensing board for psychologists, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed. I packaged everything neatly into 2 separate digital folders. Folder A, for the university, contained the emails and texts demonstrating the inappropriate relationship, along with a cover letter I'd written from the perspective of a concerned friend of the family. It focused on the gross ethical violations and the potential damage to the university's reputation. Folder B, for Dr. Reid and the licensing board, was more clinical. It included the photographic evidence from the hotel, proof of their patient-therapist relationship, and a copy of Finch's lapsed insurance policy, which Sal had managed to procure. This folder highlighted not just the ethical breach, but the professional misconduct and potential danger to the public. I scheduled both emails to be sent at exactly 8:00 p.m. on the night of our anniversary. The fallout would be immediate and catastrophic for Finch's career. His professional life would be incinerating at the exact moment his personal life was being exposed. It was a two-pronged attack, designed for maximum, inescapable impact. The final piece of the puzzle involved a man I had worked with on several construction projects, a tech wizard named Leo who specialized in corporate security and AV installations. I told him I needed a discreet AV setup for a surprise presentation in a private dining room. Leo, a man who valued discretion and a hefty consulting fee, asked no questions. On the morning of our anniversary, Leo and I met at the Willows. I had booked their most secluded private room, the Oak Room. It had a large mahogany table and a discreetly placed flat-screen monitor on the wall. Leo worked his magic, installing 2 tiny, high-definition cameras, one focused on the head of the table where I would sit, the other on the 2 chairs opposite me. He wired them for sound and linked them to a tablet I would control. "When you hit this button," Leo explained, tapping an icon on the tablet, "the screen on the wall will activate and it will start playing a live feed from these cameras. It'll also start recording everything to a secure cloud server." "Perfect," I said, my voice steady. As I stood in that empty room, the stage perfectly set, I felt a moment of profound and unnerving calm. The rage and the pain were still there, but they were now distant, like the hum of a generator powering a massive machine. I thought about the life Amelia and I had built. The first apartment, the late-night talks, the births of our children. Was there a path where I just confronted her, where we screamed and cried and maybe, just maybe, tried to salvage something from the wreckage? It was a fleeting thought, a ghost of a different timeline. But the betrayal wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a calculated campaign of deceit orchestrated with a man who was supposed to be our guide. They hadn't just broken vows, they had desecrated something sacred. They had turned my trust into a weapon against me. There was no going back. A structure with a compromised foundation can't be repaired. It has to be demolished. And tonight, I was pressing the plunger. I went home, showered, and put on my best suit. When Amelia came downstairs, dressed in a stunning new dress, she looked beautiful. For a split second, the ache in my chest was so intense it almost brought me to my knees. You look amazing, I said, and the words were true, which made the lie of the evening even more potent. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, smiling. Ready for our anniversary dinner. I can't wait, I said. And I meant it. Part 6, The Unveiling. The drive to the restaurant was thick with a tense, unspoken energy. Amelia chattered about her clients, about the kids' school projects, filling the silence. I just nodded along, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind replaying the sequence of events about to unfold. When we arrived, Chloe's car was already in the parking lot. As planned, she and Amelia had spent the afternoon at a spa. Chloe gave me a brief, tight nod as we got out of our cars. Amelia, glowing and relaxed from her massage, linked her arm through mine. I'm so glad we're doing this, she whispered. I feel like we're finally getting back on track. The irony was a physical weight in my gut. The hostess led us to the oak room. Your other guest has already arrived, Mr. Henderson, she said with a professional smile. Amelia looked at me confused. Other guest, I thought it was just us. A little surprise, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I pushed open the door, and there he was, Dr. Alastair Finch, standing by the window, a drink in his hand. He turned, a practiced, charming smile on his face. When he saw Amelia standing next to me, the smile froze, cracking like cheap veneer. The color drained from his face. His eyes darted from me to her, a cornered animal realizing the trap had just sprung. Amelia's reaction was even more telling. A small, strangled gasp escaped her lips. Her hand, which had been resting on my arm, flew to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with panic, locked with Finch's. In that one silent, terrified glance, they confessed everything. Alastair, she stammered, looking at me. Mark, what is he doing here? What's going on? Chloe stepped into the room behind us, closing the door with a quiet, definitive click. The three of them were now in my space, my design. Please have a seat, I said, my voice calm and authoritative. I gestured to the two chairs opposite me. They hesitated then, as if compelled by the sheer force of the moment. They sat. They looked like two defendants at their own trial. I remained standing at the head of the table, the tablet in my hand. Welcome, I began. Amelia, happy anniversary. Alastair, thank you for coming on such short notice. I believe you received my email, the one about your ethical and financial vulnerabilities. Finch's jaw tightened. This is highly inappropriate. I don't know what kind of game you're playing. Oh, it's a game, I cut him off, my voice turning to ice. It's a game you two started. I'm just changing the rules. See, I was led to believe my marriage was suffering from a communication problem. But it turns out it was more of an infestation problem. A predator had entered the nest, invited in by the one person who was supposed to be guarding it with me. I looked at Amelia. Tears were welling in her eyes, but I felt nothing. You must have thought I was such a fool, the hardworking, oblivious husband, so focused on my blueprints that I couldn't read the ones being drawn up right under my own roof. But architects are trained to see details others miss. Like the lingering scent of a $200 cologne on my pillows, or a silver cufflink with the initial F on your nightstand. Amelia's face crumpled. Finch remained stoic, but a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. But don't worry, I continued, my voice dangerously soft. I didn't want to rely on my own assumptions, so I gathered data. I tapped the screen of the tablet. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The first image that appeared was a screenshot of a text message from Amelia to Finch. He has no idea, does he? He's so wrapped up in his blueprints. Amelia let out a sob. Finch flinched as if he'd been struck. And then there's this, I said, swiping to the next image. It was the photo I'd taken of them outside the Briarwood Hotel, Finch's hand on the small of her back. The picture was crystal clear, their faces unmistakable. You see, you made a critical error, I said, pacing slowly. You documented everything, the emails, the texts, the photos. It's almost as if you wanted to get caught. And you, Alastair, you have a professional code of ethics, don't you? A duty of care. I wonder how your conduct squares with that. I also wonder how it squares with your two ex-wives, to whom you owe a substantial amount of alimony. Or your lapsed professional liability insurance. His mask of composure finally shattered. What do you want, Mark? He snarled. Want? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. What I wanted was a faithful wife and a trustworthy therapist. What I want now is accountability. I looked at Chloe, who had been standing silently by the door. Chloe, if you would. She opened the door and a man stepped in. He was a process server, and in his hand he held two sets of documents. He walked to the table and placed one set in front of Amelia. Amelia Henderson, you've been served with a petition for divorce. Then he turned to Finch. Dr. Alastair Finch, you've been served with a lawsuit for professional malpractice, negligence, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Finch stared at the papers as if they were venomous snakes. And just so we're clear about the stakes, I added, my voice dropping to a whisper. At 8:00 p.m., exactly 7 minutes from now, 2 emails will be sent. One will go to the president of your alma mater, detailing your predatory behavior. The other, complete with all this lovely evidence, will be sent to Dr. Evelyn Reed at the State Licensing Board. By morning, your career will be over. Your reputation will be in ashes. You, Dr. Finch, are a compromised structure. And you are being condemned. I turned my attention back to my wife, my voice devoid of all heat, leaving only a chilling emptiness. As for us, Amelia, this is our last supper. Enjoy the meal. With that, I placed the tablet on the table, turned, and walked out of the room, leaving them in the silent, crushing wreckage of the world they had built. Chloe followed me out, closing the door on the sound of Amelia's first, truly broken sob. The climax wasn't a screaming match. It was a quiet, precise, and total demolition. Part 7, Aftermath and New Foundations. Walking out of that restaurant felt like stepping out of a collapsed building into the clean air. The dust was still settling, but for the first time in months, I could breathe. Chloe drove me home, the silence in the car comfortable, respectful. There was nothing left to say. The performance was over. The aftermath was exactly as I had designed it, swift and devastating. The lawsuit I filed against Finch, combined with the official complaint to the licensing board, was a fatal blow. His practice evaporated overnight. The university quietly removed his name from their alumni mentorship program. I heard through the grapevine that he was forced to sell his house and move to a different state, a disgraced professional stripped of his license and his livelihood. He was, in every sense of the word, erased. There was a dark satisfaction in that, a sense of cosmic rebalancing. He had used his power to shatter my life, and I had used the truth to dismantle his. The divorce from Amelia was messy, but not in the way I'd expected. My evidence was so overwhelming that her lawyer immediately advised her to settle. There was no fight over assets, no dramatic custody battle for the kids. I was granted primary custody. She knew a fight would mean the sordid details of the affair becoming public record, and she couldn't bear that humiliation. There were hard conversations with our children. I told them a sanitized version of the truth, that Mom and I had grown apart and were going to live separately, but that we both loved them unconditionally. They were smart, though. They felt the seismic shift in our family's foundation. They saw their mother's shame and their father's quiet, steely grief. Healing that wound for them would be a long-term project, and it became my #1 priority. For a long time, the house felt haunted by the ghost of our marriage. I would catch myself listening for the sound of her car in the driveway, or turning to say something to an empty space beside me in bed. In these moments, the anger would fade, leaving behind the raw, aching wound of betrayal. Was there an alternate path, a world where I confronted her that first day I found the cufflink, where we screamed and cried and went to a different, non-predatory therapist and tried to rebuild, perhaps? But it would have been a life built on a lie, a constant, nagging doubt that would have poisoned everything. My path, though brutal, was clean. It was an amputation to save the patient. Amelia, for her part, seemed lost. She moved into a small apartment across town. Chloe told me she was a shell of her former self, stripped of the life and status she had taken for granted. In our few, sterile interactions, she tried to explain herself. She talked about feeling invisible, about the intoxicating feeling of being truly seen by Finch. I listened, not out of a desire to forgive, but out of a need to understand the full scope of the structural failure. I could see her side of the story, the loneliness of a woman in a comfortable but passionless marriage. Her motivations weren't pure evil. They were born of a very human, very flawed selfishness. But understanding isn't the same as absolution. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Months turned into a year. The quiet in the house slowly transformed from a void of absence into a space of peace. I poured myself into my work, not as an escape, but as a form of creation. I landed the Legacy Project, a beautiful, modern art museum that felt like a testament to building something new and lasting from a clear-eyed vision. I poured myself into my kids, coaching my son's soccer team, helping my daughter with her science fair projects. We were building a new family structure, smaller but more honest. One evening, I was sketching at the kitchen island when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a woman I'd met through a mutual friend, a landscape architect named Sarah. We did coffee a few times. It was easy, comfortable. She knew I was divorced, but not the details. Still up for that hike on Saturday, she wrote. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. Forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, not for Amelia. Maybe I never would be. Revenge, I had achieved that, and while it had provided a grim satisfaction, it hadn't healed the wound. It had only cauterized it. The true resolution wasn't about her or about him. It was about me. It was about the quiet, resilient joy of designing a new life, of laying a new foundation, one built not on a shared past, but on the promise of a peaceful future. It was about realizing that the most important structure I would ever build was my own sense of self. And for the first time in a very long time, the blueprints looked perfect. If this story hit home for you, hit that like button, subscribe, or give it an upvote. I'm sharing more tales of love, loss, and the intricate art of payback. Now I have to ask you, forgive or revenge, what would you have done in my shoes? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. Tag a friend who loves a story where the tables get turned. And check out my next video for a saga about a woman who discovered her husband's secret family on his own live stream. You don't want to miss it. Clip your favorite moment from this story and share it.